to be here. And we have a service that's titled Being Kind in a Cruel World. That's the subject matter. And basically, it's all about manifesting kindness is what I want to get across. And I want to do that in two ways. There's really two topics I hope to present. One is the three principles of Trinity, and that was part of the sacred reading. And secondly is using the Trinity in what's known as the Enneagram. That's probably a new concept for some of us. But the Enneagram is just an elaborate, advanced version of the Trinity. It's the same thing. It's just a Trinity a little bit deeper. So when we're getting into manifestation, instead of having 3 stages, we have 9 stages. So it's a little bit more intricate. So that's an intricate way of manifesting Trinity. So let me begin by saying that really we have a Trinity that we use quite a bit, and it's called the Lord's Prayer. We don't often think of it as a Trinity, but the Lord's Prayer, the simple version of the Lord's Prayer, is based on the Trinity principle. It says, ask, and it will be given. That's the first part of the Trinity. Ask, it's an action part. Seek, and ye shall find. Seeking is really the receptive part of the Trinity, the feminine part of the Trinity. Knocking on the door, and the door will be open, is the manifestation part of the Trinity. It's one we use, it's really what the Lord's Prayer is based on. We often don't think of those simple words, A-S-K, ask, seek, and knock, as being Trinity, but that's a simple application of the Trinity. Asking, as I look at my Bible from Holmes Institute, and the meaning of, in the Greek, what the Greeks say about what the meaning of ask is, and seeking and knocking. And when they talk about asking, it's very interesting. They say we need to ask when we want something from the divine. Ask as we're an equal, and not as a beggar. Ask as an equal from the divine, and it's more likely to be given as opposed to being someone who's asking, oh, just pour me, I just want something from you, great master. Ask as an equal from Father, Mother, God. So you're on equal footing with the goody. That's the proper way. Seeking and knocking are kind of interesting when I looked it up, because they actually refer to the future. We're praying for something for the future. We're making a command for the future. When we're seeking, it means not just seeking now. It means continue to seek, continue to be open, continue to look until you find what you're looking for. Don't just do it now. There has to be an ongoing process. Knocking is also an ongoing process. It's just not knock right now. It's continue to knock until something comes forward. Sometimes we have a thing where we say treat and move your feet. That's the knocking part. Continue to knock on those walls if there are walls preventing you from getting what you want. Continue to uncover what needs to be uncovered, but it's sort of take action, so to speak. And sometimes, we don't think about this maybe, because a lot of times when we do a prayer, we want stuff. But sometimes the prayer has to be about stuff we don't want. For example, one big part of the Lord's Prayer is lead us not into temptation. What we're saying to God is, hey, don't lead me into down a bad path in the future. Lead me away from evil in the future. I'm asking now, but if it comes up, hopefully I'm led away from this in the future. So that's a way where we're only not asking for, asking for something, but we're asking against something, so to speak. That's just the nature of how it is. What we should do is to somehow stop action sometimes from happening before it happens. That's the nature of the future. Now, let me define the Enneagram briefly and then get into the principles and the meat of the talk. The Enneagram is basically an upgraded version of the Trinity. This is sort of a book I'm not formally introducing, but it's called Trinities to Enneagrams. But the Enneagram is an upgraded version of the Trinity. It's a Trinity. It's just it's slowed down and broken into a few more parts so you can really get how it is to have an idea that's cause and get to the manifestation, not in 3 steps, but in 9 steps. How does this work? Well, basically, everybody's familiar with the 4 seasons. We have spring, we have summer, we have autumn, and then we have winter. Those are the 4 seasons. Each of those seasons is a Trinity, 3 months. And we look at the 3 and the 4, that's 12 months. That's sort of a well-known Trinity. The 12 months is composed of 4 different Trinities. Trinity in the spring, Trinity in the summer, etc., etc. With the Enneagram, we don't look at the year as being composed of 12 months, it's composed of 9 segments, 40 days each. And so what we have is a 4-month is the first third of the cycle, the second 4 months is the middle third of the cycle, the last 4 months is the last third of the cycle. And each part is 40 days, 40 days, 40 days. So 120 days to begin with, 120 days in the middle, 120 days in the end. So it's a trinity. They're both trinities. It's just looking at, instead of having a 12-part year, 12 months of the year, 12 signs, so to speak, Aries, etc., 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 we have 9 psychological types, and they can be measured. This is sort of a new measure that's up and coming. It's not as popular as the Jungian types of introversion, extroversion, and the 8 basic types. This is 9 types, but it's actually called sometimes the sacred Trinity because it's built on the Holy Trinity. And it's interesting when we talk even about the Holy Trinity, even Holmes does that, even David Harvey did that when we met in the park. They say Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, or Holy Ghost. That's the feminine phrase. Why do you want to put it all the way at the end? It should be Father, Holy Ghost, and Son. But that's just how it kind of comes across. So basically the Trinity is 9 types or 9 40-day sections or segments. Now, in order to look at the Trinity, we have to really look at the law of 1, 2, 3, because that's how it's based on. So let me talk about the law that grounds the Trinity in ways that we have a good sense of, but maybe haven't heard quite explicitly, so I'm going to do that. So the law of 1, and we all talk about oneness. That's the first core principle, is the principle of oneness. And 1 is really a seed. A seed is, when you only have a seed, it's only one thing. It's a seed. And that seed contains all that's imaginable, all that's thinkable, all that's doable within the context of that one seed. Even when we talk about the individual, it's fair to say that you, or me, is the center of my universe. I am the center of my universe. You are the center of your universe. If we think a little bit bigger, I am the center of the whole universe. But, you know, a lot of times it's easier to think that I'm the center of my world and you're the center of your world. If you don't think that way, it's hard to govern your world. It's hard to be the boss, so to speak. Anyway, according to the law of 1, everything exists in the same place at the same time, and there ain't no division. There's no division. It's like being in the Garden of Eden. There's no separation between us and the divine. Everything is united as one thing. As everything is just connected at the same time. And with oneness, and with 1, there's no up, there's no down. There's no here, there's no there. There's no now, there's no then. There's no time, there's no space. It's kind of amazing. No time and space. No here and there. No now and then. No up and down. That's true, because oneness, everything is just one. It's in a circle. It's in a seed. It's just one thing living side by side. That's how it was in the Garden of Eden. What happened is, at some point, we decided we like to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And that's where the thinking came in. And thinking splits things in halves and makes dualities and makes separations. It causes things to be in separate camps. And so everything gets defined in terms of this good and evil, space and time, thoughts and emotions, dark and light, good and evil. Everything with thinking gets divided. That's tree of knowledge. And so basically the tree of knowledge lives outside of the Garden of Eden because of duality. But we need that as part of the Trinity to manifest things. Now, let me just talk about 2 things that we think about and maybe we don't quite observe that we created. In oneness, there's no time and there's no space. Time and space are mental creation. We created time and space. We made it up. Now, there's 2 kinds of time, for example. The mind creates 2 kinds of times. There's literal time. You can look at the clock. It's 1 hour, 1 minute, 1 day, 1 month if you go to a big calendar, 1 year. That's literal time. That's how we measure time. But then there's the emotional time. And emotional time works on a different principle. The way emotional time works is this. If you're having a good time, time goes by fast. If you're in the pits and having a bad time, time slows down. It takes forever to get through a bad time. So emotions measure time in a totally different way than the literal clock or the mind measures time. When it comes to emotional time, or emotional space and literal space, they're measured in a different way too. The mind created that. Literal space would be, like, let's say these 2 were having a disagreement in their relationship and having an altercation magnification. The thinking person might say, I don't understand, we're sitting 2 feet apart, of course we're getting along. The emotional person will say, wait a minute, I don't feel close at all. Even though one person is saying we're only 2 feet apart, the other person is saying emotionally we're at a distance. So both of them are talking about space, but there's emotional space and there's literal space. That's the nature of duality. That's a certain example of what we do with the mind to create separation in everything that comes up. But truth is, we need the separation in order to really understand things. Now, the Trinity part is very interesting because that's what we really focus on is the Trinity. And it's the law of three, is another way of looking at it, the law of three. And we need the Trinity for any kind of growth, any kind of real change, any kind of reconciliation, any kind of manifestation. If you just have father and mother and they don't produce anything, we never get any results. If you just have an active side and a receptive side, you don't get a result. So we need to have a conscious mind and we need to have a creative mind, but the two have to mingle together to create a result. That's where the Trinity comes in. The Trinity is the mingling of the masculine face and the feminine face of the divine to create a manifestation. That's actually only the beginning, as we'll see in a minute. So the Trinity is governed by the law, what could be called the law of three. And so the law of three is, as I just mentioned, we have the conscious mind or cause, then we have the receptive mind, which kind of takes orders from the conscious mind. And then when the two mingle together, we get a result. We get results are facilitated. The Tao Te Ching from I Ching puts this in a different way. It says exactly the same thing. It says 1 gives birth to 2. 2 gives birth to 3, and 3 gives birth to everything else. That's how the Chinese say in the Tao Te Ching and Taoism. Now, to the Enneagram. The Enneagram, which I've kind of defined, is 9 phases of the year. And this idea of 9 phases of the year is that everything is in a cycle. When we create something with our mind and manifest it, that's only a cycle, because whatever we manifest is going to fade away, it's going to be destroyed, and we have to create again, and the cycle goes around and around. It's kind of like the year. Every year we have springtime, things grow and they do whatever they're going to do throughout the year. Leaves fall off in the winter, and then we start a new spring. And in our lifetime, it's the same thing. We go through a certain number of years, and then the cycle begins. We believe in reincarnation, which I do, and you probably do too. There's a reincarnation cycle. We would go through this lifetime, but that's only this lifetime. There's a life after death, and then there's another rebirth, and it goes on and on and on. That's how the universe does this thing. So the Enneagram is really just looking at the whole cycle of life. If you look at my life cycle, your life cycle, is 9 phases that we go through. It's kind of not too different from, there's a spring phase, and a summer phase, and an autumn phase, and a winter phase. We could look at it that way. Now, what I'm going to do is talk about the 9 phases in a little different way, because I'm going to do it from 2 perspectives quickly. First is looking at what's called inner observation. This is kind of an art to that. Every time we do visioning, that's what we're doing. We're observing the inner world in order to affect the world out around us. And we have to use inner observation for any kind of visioning, any kind of contemplation, any kind of planning, any kind of meditation, on and on and on. If you're going to make things, you got to think about what you're going to make first. You don't just make it without thinking about it. So we have to observe the inner to create the outer. It's basically what's going on. So when we look at even when we look at the Trinity, we need to look at what we're thinking of before we even open our mouths, so to speak. But when we look at the whole cycle of completion, the whole cycle of manifestation, which is ongoing, it goes around and around and around, kind of like a circle. We have the first third, the middle third, and the last third. First third would be parts 1, 2, 3. The middle third, parts 4, 5, 6. The last third, parts 7, 8, 9. And then the cycle is complete. We have manifestation, but guess what? Everything that's manifested is going to fade away, and we have to renew and start all over again. Whether it's in this lifetime or the next lifetime. But completion is a big part of the Trinity. Initiating things is a big part of the Trinity, and that middle ground is a huge part of the Trinity as well. All I'm going to do is break it into a few segments. So let me give the subjective interpretation of it, because it's a little bit faster. So when we do a visioning, if we really bring the microscope down to, or concentrating, or contemplate, if we bring the microscope down to what are we actually doing when we do visioning? Well, this is what we're doing. The first step is you have to have a question in mind, or an idea in mind, something you want to voice. You can't really, there's no point in doing a visioning without any idea in mind. It's almost like if I have a tarot deck and someone just pulls a card and says, what does this mean? Well, I could tell them. I said, well, what, did you have a question? Well, no. Well, then it doesn't have a meaning. If we just close our eyes and catch visions, but we have no question, we're not seeing anything. It's not that you don't get anything, but it's just, it's a different process. So first you have to have a question. After you have a question, you have to begin to focus on that question. What am I really asking the divine? What am I asking? What am I really seeking? Whether it's a scientific thing, whether it's a new mission, I have a hypothesis of something I want, and then you keep your mind focused on it. Then you begin to notice more and more stuff about what you're focused on, more and more details. And as you focus on those details, things become magnified. You say, oh, this is really what I want to look at. This is really where I'm going. This is what's happening. Then you move to the middle phase. In the middle phase, you have to do something that sometimes it's not easy to do. You have to forget yourself. You have to go so deep inside, like taking a deep breath, really being still in your mind, and kind of dropping your ego to the side, letting it go, and just having a sense of losing yourself so much that if someone dropped a pin for a moment, you might say, oh, I was off in it, wherever I was at. So you go into a deep state. It may only take 90 seconds, it may only take a minute, because when we do visioning, there's a point where you get so quiet. Why? Because you're listening to receive what the divine has to say. Once we go into that state of incubation, of receptivity, which is the middle part of the Trinity, the middle part of the 9 stages, then a light bulb goes off after a minute. You say, oh, I see it. I think I know what it is. But you don't really know what it is. What you know is you saw a vision. Maybe it means this, maybe it means that, but you don't really know exactly what it means. Then that's where the critical mind comes in and says, okay, I collected one vision here, collected another vision here, you have a vision, I have a vision. What does this all mean? And we start analyzing, we start picking it apart. So, okay, I think it means this. But that picking it apart and really drilling down on what it is doesn't happen right away. But if you really want to manifest it, you have to know what's being said. If you just get a vision, you don't know totally what's being said. You just have an image and a hodgepodge of maybe you're right, maybe you're not right. So it's good to have I think I know what it means, but it's also good to have a drilling down and a picking apart to really get clear on it. Now once you're clear on it, once you pick it apart, then you can begin to move into the manifestation stage, which starts with stage 7, 8, and 9. In stage 7, it's like we're so excited that we know what the thing means, we want to go out and just tell everybody, hey, I got this new thing, I know what it means, I'm ready to do something now. That's the first part of manifestation, wanting to share what you come up with. The second part of manifestation is not only are you sharing it, you get a little bit righteous, or self-righteous, or aggressive. I got to do this. Anyone gets in my way, it's too bad. I'm going to do whatever it is to do. Why? Because I'm excited this needs to be done. That's sort of called the stage of being, I don't know what else you want to call it, being a little bit pushy, being a little bit dictatorial. Why? Because you know what you know and you're going to get it done. And hopefully people will help you. If they don't, they're going to appreciate what you do in the long run because it's coming forth. What you're doing is you're taking all the excitement of knowing what came forth from the divine, and you're making it into concrete reality. And sometimes to do that, you got to be a little bit assertive, aggressive, pushy, whatever. The final stage is actually the stage of making peace. Okay, now that I put this out, I got to make sure everybody's okay with it. I got to make sure it's accepted. I got to make sure it's something that we can all live with. When we are able, if we're able to live with it and make peace with it, then I've done my whole job. But guess what? Your job is done. Peace has been brought. This whole new order has been instituted because of the vision. Guess what? There's going to be a new vision, and I'll start all over again. Okay? Once you manifest something, it's only the beginning. Even Ernest Holmes says, science of mind is open at the top. It's not like Mary Baker Eddy that says, this is it. What I've said is final. It's not final. Nothing is final. Even science is not final, even though sometimes we think when there's a scientific law. That's it. Well, it's only it until someone else comes along with a better mousetrap. Now, let me go through the same thing, but I'm going to give more of an objective interpretation. And I'm going to put a little bit more meat on the bones, and then I will help conclude my talk. So I mentioned there's 9 stages, or 9 segments, or 9 components to the Enneagram. And each of these components is also a psychological type. It's kind of like this. The year, throughout the year we go through 12 signs, and each of those signs is a different type of person. Aries is a different type of person than a Taurus. Taurus is a little different than a Gemini. Gemini is different than a Cancer. Cancer is different than a this and this. So if we slow it down, what a cycle is, when we come into life, we're born at a certain time of the year. That's our sort of soul type. That's sort of our sign. But when we do visioning, we actually go through the signs. We just go through them so fast we don't really notice them. When we go through the year or any cycle, we go through the signs also. We don't think about it that way, but it's the same kind of process. So stage 1, the first three parts of the Trinity are all about acting, all about putting something in motion. But the very first one is called the action stage of defining things. And some people are put on this planet to define things, to ask new questions, to create new things, and help others do the same. Now there's some individuals I'm going to mention, just examples of 2 or 3 people with each stage, so you maybe get a sense of the difference. One of our great stage 1 persons, who's also called a reformer, also called an initiator, was Nelson Mandela. Another one was Mary Baker Eddy. She actually initiated something new. Another one was Cesar Chavez. Now there's thousands of stage 1 people. Stage 1 people are spring-type people, but they're basically called stage 1. The first part of the Trinity, those who define things and put out new information and put out a new order to get the ball rolling kind of thing. Then there's stage 2. Stage 2 is also action, but the action here is focusing on what was started in the first stage and bringing it into a sharper focus, gaining more knowledge, and beginning to open your mind to receive more and more information. It's not really a leader as much as it is someone who's receptive to the divine, someone who's really trying to get deep questions answered. And examples here would be Mother Teresa, would be Desmond Tutu, even Jesus would be a 2, for example, in terms of the cycle. Stage 3 is where we begin to combine the first 2 stages and say, okay, I've asked the question, I've been focused on the question. Now let me collect more details as to what this really means and try to anchor it into something that makes a lot of sense, so I can know what's coming forth and I can bring forth something new. Stage 3 individuals, and what stage 3 is all about is the recognition that something big is coming, and I have a lot of details on this, is what we do in stage 3. And so stage 3 people, if we give a personality type to them, we would call them achievers, or we'd call them performers. That's what they're called in the Enneagram. Incidentally, stage 2, they're called helpers. That's the nature. But stage 3 individuals, I'll mention some names, they have huge names. One is Muhammad Ali. He's an achiever, he's a performer. Another one is someone who we maybe don't think of that way, but she is in that category. Marianne Williamson, she's a performer. And maybe we don't think about this guy, but you probably, if I mention his name, you say, oh yeah, he was a performer. Elvis Presley, he's gone now, but he was a performer too. These are individuals who really have a lot of detail and know what's coming forth, and they can just really kind of put it out. Now, we move into the middle section of the Trinity, and there's a Trinity within it, three phases. Phase 4 is where the individual is really a creative individual. These are called the romantics. These are people that forget who they are, or suspend their ego and really take on the world of dreams, put on a whole new mask, let new information come in. We do this when we get to the stage of visioning, where we just suspend our ego and let the divine come forward. And this is a stage where people would be thought of as great artists or great inventors in some ways. They're idealists, they're dreamers, they're romantics. One clear example here would be someone like Michael Jackson, I think, would be in that category. Perhaps Walt Disney would be in that category. Maybe Meryl Streep would be in that category. These are people who can suspend their ego and just let these ideas come through, and then That's what their gift to society is. Stage 4, right in the middle of that, is receiving the vision, receiving the insight, getting the aha. This is a whole new insight. I've been focused in deep meditation. Now something new came forward. I think I got something new. Let me share it with the world. Now, to put this in a concrete term, these would be called observers. These are people that observe the inner world. The greatest example I can think of, and there's two here. One would be the Buddha. He's an observer of the inner world, came forth with a lot of good stuff about how life is. Another modern person still living would be Stephen Hawking, the great physicist, scientist, who's, I think he sits in the same chair Isaac Newton sat in when Isaac Newton was around. And in the last phase of this middle section of the middle part of the Trinity, is stage 6, would be the analytical phase. This is where you got a new insight, something new came through. Now you have to sit down and pick it apart and analyze it. What does this really mean? This is called the skeptic phase, or the devil's advocate. This is where people ask questions. What does this mean? What does that mean? I don't know about this, I don't know about that. Now there are some people who personify this. One would be Chris Rock, who you might not think about that, but you listen to most of his humor. He's a comedian, but almost what he does is he just criticizes society. He criticizes things, and people laugh at it and make fun of it. One who's not someone we want to remember a lot would be Hitler, a very critical person, just criticized things. Even we had an FBI director, the longest one in history, J. Edgar Hoover is an example of a criticizer or a skeptic, someone who just is a very sort of negative thinker. We need that because that's the thing that makes us really understand what's going on, picking apart the inner world. Then finally we move into the manifestation stage. It's a Trinity. We can simply say manifestation, but if you break it into the Trinity within, it's manifestation kind of put into 3 little segments. The first segment is where someone has the vision. It's clear because it's been analyzed and picked apart and we know what it really is. Now we're ready to shout it to the world and share it to the world. This is the stage of the preacher or the minister or the enthusiast, the person who they got the truth, they got it from the divine, they want to shout it from the mountaintops, tell it to the world. This is what the priests do, this is what the enthusiasts do. And you don't have to be a literal religious figure to do this. Someone who did this very well, and we all rely on it, is a guy named Steve Jobs. That's what he did. Another person who did this very well was someone named Joseph Campbell. Another one who did this very well is someone named Matthew Fox. Maybe not as well known, but some people know who he is. Now, those are people who caught the vision, really know the vision, and their whole mission is just to share it, put it out there. Now you have some other individuals who come along. They're stage 8 types, getting close to the end. These are the people that know it so well. They're about making things in a concrete reality. It's like imposing their will on society in sometimes somewhat of a brutal way. And they don't necessarily mean to be that way. They just are so determined to make it happen that either you're going to follow them or they're going to run you over kind of thing. They're kind of like the steamroller types. And I'll mention a few names and you'll see what I mean. One of them is our president, Donald Trump. He's an 8 type, steamroller type, wants to impose his will on things. Another one is a guy whose music I like, but I hear in his band, he's hard to work with. This is James Brown. He was determined. I can't really sing, but he sure put out his music. Everybody loved it. And finally, there's a guy on the radio who has a big voice, and he's been having it for years. That's Rush Limbaugh. He just imposes his will on a whole following. That's an 8 type. Just he's making his reality. He's imposing it on society. Now, I mention these individuals because what that does is it just allows you to maybe look at the Trinity in a little bit more grounded way, step by step. And then finally, the last phase of the Trinity is facilitation. All of the manifestation stages are about facilitating the first 2 segments. So with the last part of facilitation, this is where we become a peacemaker or we become a mediator. What we're trying to do is to integrate everything that's proceeded from the early part of the cycle to the last part, to bring it together in a peaceful way, in an integrated way, to make heaven on earth a reality kind of thing. And the big names here would be Gandhi, would be Martin Luther King, and would be Abraham Lincoln. These are individuals that were peacemakers. A lot of stuff happened. A lot of ideas were out there, but someone had to bring it into a place where it was accepted in society. Now, even after all those great people, there's a whole lot of work need to be done after Abraham Lincoln, a whole lot after Gandhi, a whole lot after King, but they did a whole lot in their time and helped us out quite a bit. So that's the nature of the talk, and hopefully you have a sense of just how this whole idea of applying the Trinity to kindness would work. I didn't actually talk about it literally, but if our purpose is to manifest kindness, the best way to manifest kindness is to ask God, dear God, dear universe, what must I do to manifest kindness? We can't just go up and down the street giving out what you could. But, you have to ask, what should I do to create kindness? What is mine to do to create kindness in a group? What is ours to do, a larger group? What is ours to do to create kindness, given where we are, given how to do it? And you're going to, if you do it correctly through visioning, even if you don't vision, but you call it planning, or you call it contemplation, or you call it meditation, you're going to have to come up with some ideas that have to come from within. And once you get those ideas, if we're doing it correctly, we're going to manifest them. Now with that, I'm going to say thank you. I'm going to end this talk and invite you to go within for a moment.